Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to WillCast. It's the podcast with the most creative name in the entire world. Thank you for tuning in as always. I really appreciate you liking, commenting, subscribing, all that good stuff. Today, Matthew Weathers, you're with us. How's it going?
I'm doing well. Good to be here. Thank you.
Good to have you. I've been looking forward to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking your time to do this.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
So I found your YouTube channel, like many others, I guess, from your amazing April Fool's jokes in class. Which, by the way, I noticed one of them have 128 million views at this point. That
Yes,
is,
that's from 2017, April of 2017.
yeah, that's incredible. I think that's gotta be one of the most viewed YouTube videos that are not music videos, right?
I've never looked at a list, but it's probably in the top 10,000 videos, I suppose. I don't know.
It's incredible and it's super admirable what you do. I really gotta be honest, which was one of the reasons I was really excited to talk to you. I think it's so important to have for kids and students to have good teachers that brings energy and makes it desirable for students to actually learn, because I remember when I went to school, I had a hard time sitting down and listening to the teachers always. So I guess right off the bat, could you give a brief introduction to who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I teach at Biola University, which is in Los Angeles County in California, and my job is a part-time math teacher. Sometimes I teach computer science. My full-time job is working in the Office of Digital Learning. So we put classes online for the university. But this one class that the video is from is a large mathematics class for humanities majors. So it's kind of like a intro to mathematics and even the history of mathematics and how philosophy and even theology and probability of statistics, algebra, a bunch of different ideas of mathematics. And so I got to keep it lively, got to make it interesting. And so I try to do lots of different things to make it an interesting class. And starting in 2009, I think, 2010, I started doing April Fool's jokes. It's not really a prank in the sense of, doing something like a prank, but it's more just like a visually interesting little
Mm,
trick, I guess would be the way to put it. But
yeah,
yeah, so I've done those for several years.
that's amazing. Did you have a teacher when you went to school that kind of pulled off the same things, did April Fool's jokes on you in school?
No, I never had a teacher who did that kind of thing. I've had many good teachers through the years, and the thing that I took from those teachers is just to have a passion for what they're learning or for what we are learning. And so if the teacher is not excited about what they're teaching, then it's hard to get the students excited about it. And so I did take that from many of my teachers growing up. Yeah, I think any subject can be made interesting. And so if I, I suppose that I would say that most people who think that they're not good at mathematics or don't like mathematics, it's probably some teacher's fault somewhere along the way that made it seem boring. And vice versa, I'd say most people who do like mathematics or science or history or whatever subject, it's often because they had a teacher who conveyed that interest and that passion for the subject, and that's what gets students excited. And not just students. I think anybody, even if you're out of school, you can take time to learn things, expose yourself to new ideas, keep learning, even if you aren't a student formally.
I agree 100%. I remember history specifically was one of those subjects that I hated in school, and looking back at it, it was probably because I the teacher was really boring, and we would just read and read and read in class instead of doing practical things, I guess. And it's so interesting because nowadays, like a few years out of school, history is something I'm so fascinated by all of a sudden. So it's definitely so important to have an exciting teacher that makes it desirable for students to learn.
Yeah, and I feel like the same way about history now also. And it's because I had a good history teacher in 11th grade who really told history as a story, and that's kind of what it is. Basically, it's just interesting stories.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like I could imagine if I had a teacher who's like really living themselves into the stories and telling, uh, instead of we just reading from a book. I mean, I think I would probably be excited about history a lot earlier.
That's right. Yeah. So, but in general, keep learning is my advice that I tell people. Do you feel like you're learning? Like, what have you learned in the past month or two? I'm sorry, I'm not the interview. I shouldn't ask you
No, 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 it's
questions.
it's fine. I feel like I'm trying to learn something new every day. Recently, I've looked a lot into nutrition actually. So
Oh,
I'm
interesting.
always striving to make myself smarter and by through this podcast, talking to interesting people like yourself, I feel like I'm constantly learning something new, which is it's so exciting. Learning is so exciting, I feel like, which I felt the exact opposite when I was younger in school.
It's interesting how it's changed too. When I was in school, mainly the only place you could learn was in a formal setting in a classroom. I suppose you could
Mm,
read library books, but it just wasn't easy to learn things. And there were TV shows occasionally that would be educational, but these days anybody can learn just about anything on YouTube or online. There's so many different venues for educational content. It's still probably important to have formal schools because schools provide the credentialing
mm,
and the sort of the motivation to finish a whole series of educational content pieces. And then all those pieces together count as a degree. But if you're sufficiently motivated and you don't have the opportunity to go to formal school or it's too expensive or whatever, if you have the motivation and an internet connection, you can learn almost as much as you need for almost anything.
yeah.
Um, and of course, even just little projects around the home, how to cook this, how to fix that, how to change the air filter in your cabin, the cabin air filter in your car. Simple things like that.
Yeah.
More people are realizing that all you have to do is do a YouTube search or any type of online search.
Exactly. Yeah, I've always grown up with the internet, so I don't know a time before when information wasn't, readily available to everyone. But this is something I've wondered about often. Do you think there will be a future where formal education will be pushed aside and people will only just learn by themselves?
Probably not, because as human beings, it seems that even if the raw content is out there, that may be enough for sufficiently motivated people, but many people just prefer or they do better in a social context.
Mm,
And so um having and also when you're a teenager or a young person, it's not easy to be motivated to go to school.
mm,
But if you have sort of this formal structure that you're there already and you have to go to avoid getting marked absent, uh, and besides all your friends are in class, you might as well go to class. These kinds of things um, are little tricks we play to help us learn the things that we need to learn anyway. And in a sense, I think that this question, education's been remarkably similar for hundreds of years, with the teacher standing in front of a classroom of
mm.
people. And then people have variously prognosticated the complete overhaul of education because now we have radio and you could tune into radio. And then, oh, wait, here comes television and we could do education on television. That didn't really happen. And then, oh, here comes the internet and we have podcasts and we have these things. Oh, and then here comes mobile phones. So every few years there's some new technology. And it is certainly true that those technologies can enhance and make new options for education. But so far, it still is the case that in the fall, I'm going to go stand in a classroom in front of 20 students who are sitting in the same room with me and
Mm.
talk directly at them in person. Um, I suppose there's still questions about whether that's the right way to do it or the best way to do it. But so far, we as a society haven't found a better way to convey information in a way that motivates people well enough to attend and finish a course of action, using the social pressures and social cues of being in class together.
Mm.
So I don't know if it's the best way, but maybe I'll say it's pretty good for now, and I'm open to other ideas, but we'll see.
Yeah. I think especially for young men, it's hard to sit still in those young years because of our biology. Men are the hunters, getting out there, being wild. So I think, do you think that in general, education is more catered towards women?
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up the idea that our biological sort of needs for that. Um, it's an interesting idea. I think that maybe the way that we do education now does cater more towards women. Like I was just saying, it's there's sort of social pressures and being
Mm-hmm.
with other people. But I think the best educators can read the classroom and read the students and understand what they need. And the best educators are able to bring some of that into the classroom. Active learning, or even lab classes. You're doing stuff. You're
Yeah.
out there looking outside of the classroom. So for sure, you're correct that we need to supplement sort of sitting in the classroom with other modes of learning. And I think it's reasonable to say that there are differences in the way that men and women learn somewhat. So yeah, that's a good point.
I think one of the reasons why formal education should probably stay. I mean, I'm kind of conflicted because I really like the idea of teaching yourself through the internet, and
Me too.
I have been kind of against formal education in a way, but one thing I will say that is so important about formal education is what you also talked about, the social aspect, developing social skills, getting together. Because if you were just at home, like on Zoom, the past few years with the coronavirus, it's been hard to socialize even during class over Zoom.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I've talked to some people who said things like, well, it could be that the internet and self-guided learning will be the way that we learn content. But as far as credentialing goes, how do you know if somebody learned this stuff
Mm,
correctly or not? And so
yeah.
there may be ways that you could learn on your own, but somehow prove that you come to a certain level of competence on the subject matter through something more formal. Not even, and it could be a test, but tests aren't the best way to measure learning in all cases. So it could be some other way. But then also, um, the standard type of college education, so after high school in the United States anyway, is that 18 to 22-year-olds go away to college, live on campus, live in the dorms, make friends, go to class, that kind of thing. And I think there's still an appetite for that kind of social interaction, like moving out of the house and living with a bunch of other people your
Mm,
age. But it could be, and I'd be open to suggestions about this. It could be that we could provide that type of social setting, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that everybody's in the same educational thing. So
mm,
maybe we have a college where an online college where everybody goes, moves into dorms, they socialize, eat together, hang out, but then they're all in different, carefully curated, specialized online educational programs.
mm,
Or maybe there's a group of them, like all the physics majors, they're living in the dorm and they get together once or twice a week to work on homework together. But then the rest of the time they're hanging out with other people who are taking online classes from Harvard or online classes from Berkeley or online classes from a state school. It could be that they're getting their educational content from separate places but living together in a common place. So I mean, that's kind of a utopia vision for
yeah.
what could happen, and it would take quite a bit of change. And there's a lot of institutional inertia and pressure to keep things the way that they are currently. But I could see things, you know, there are big changes afoot, and it could be that something like that would work.
It's a very interesting concept. Yeah. Yeah. Did you have any bad teachers yourself?
Yeah, I'm sure I did. None stand out particularly. Um, yeah, in some cases, I had teachers where I felt like I didn't learn as much as I wanted to, or didn't understand the stuff as well as I could. In those cases, and I tell my students this, I say, hey, if you're ever in a class that you feel like you're not learning as much as you want to, or that wish you could, then don't blame the teacher, even if it is their fault. Uh, Take initiative and go learn the stuff on your own.
Mm.
So I would advise anyone who feels like they have a bad teacher to go online and, if your chemistry teacher isn't making sense on the one thing about how, you know, organic chemistry and ions or whatever, go online on YouTube and learn the stuff yourself. Or better yet, and if it's a social thing, find two or three other people you can study with, work on the homework together, learn stuff, teach each other. The best way to actually learn something is to teach someone. So if you're a
Ah,
student
yeah.
in a hard class, find some other people, get together and teach them something and have them teach you another part. And
Yeah, it's a win-win.
that's the way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm also curious about, your why you started YouTube and, why you like editing videos so much because your April Fool's pranks are also, edited videos essentially.
Yes, they are. And I made a little how-to, behind the screens or behind the scenes video, a little bit about how it works. But basically, I got the idea just because I was teaching mathematics in a class that had a chalkboard with a screen in front of it. And so I would do stuff on the chalkboard, then put the screen down and show some slides and go back and forth. But there was a big gap between the screen and the chalkboard. And I don't know why I thought about it one day. I thought, what would happen if in the middle of class I just hid behind the screen and just like disappeared? And that, students, I thought, that's not that interesting. But then I thought, what if on the screen there's a video of me walking into the screen at the same time? So the first
Ah,
couple
yeah.
were hardly more than just setting up a camera at the screen where I would be walking and sort of timing it. I Our university has quite a few film majors. We're in Los Angeles area, and the film industry is a big industry here.
Mm.
And so over the years, several film majors helped me edit some of those videos. But then I thought I want a little bit more creative control, and I'm always interested in learning. So I slowly learned Adobe Premiere, a little bit of After Effects, and started doing them on my own.
That's awesome. Yeah, like I said, it's super admirable, like the effort you put into the April Fools. Do you do them every year?
It depends. I feel like I've done them for a while. I don't know that I will continue to do them in the future. I have other ideas of more educational content.
Mm.
I did do them for every year for 10 years, but this year, 2022, I didn't. I actually did two during the pandemic on Zoom.
Yeah.
And so that was a challenge, but actually in some sense it was easier because I could do the stuff ahead of time. But yeah, I like doing other projects. So the mathematics of cryptocurrency, I made an intro to Bitcoin video, and what's the future of cryptocurrency, stuff like that. I did geometry and how geometry shows that the Earth is not flat.
Mm-hmm.
There are some people. The internet brings out sort of the weirdest ideas, but there are some people who literally say that the Earth is flat, and so I did a couple of videos about how mathematics shows that that's not true. And I've got lots of other ideas of things I want to post, so we'll see.
Yeah, the flat Earth video of yours was really interesting. I am by no means a flat earther, but I'm still, how I'm not good at mathematics. I'll just say right off the bat. But how is it possible just with mathematics to prove that the Earth is a sphere?
That's a good question. So I would actually stay away from the word prove. I think that proof belongs in mathematics and logic. So I can prove that 2 plus 2 equals 4, or
Mm.
that there are an infinite number of prime numbers. I think as far as education, I'm sorry, as far as science goes, the natural world, you'd say things like there's strong evidence for this or for that. Um, if I look over there and see a tree, that's pretty strong evidence that there's a tree over there. but technically, it could be that there's a screen right there that somebody was trying to fool
Yeah.
me, and my eyes are deceiving me, and I'm experiencing some hallucination. So, as far as proof goes, all that to say, I wouldn't say that proof, uh, yeah, I wouldn't say that you can prove X, Y, or Z about the real world. I would say geometry, the strong evidence for the Earth being not flat is that from two different cities, you can look up and see the moon at different angles, um, but you see the same face of the moon. That means the moon is really far away. And over the night, a full moon is up all night and it stays the same size in the sky the whole time. Like you measure the size. So if it were really going over a flat plane, then it would be getting smaller to bigger and
Ah,
bigger, then
yeah.
smaller and smaller.
Ah.
So just simple geometry, simple, you know, the idea of the law of perspective. And there's lots of different things like that that you can look at.
I also never understood how you can argue that the earth is flat when you can literally fly from America to Asia and I can fly from Europe to America, right? So how would that
That's
work
right.
if the earth is flat?
Uh, it wouldn't, but in general, they have long, complicated explanations for all kinds of things. But in general, it's an interesting topic to me because it's all about what counts as truth, what counts as evidence, how do we find reliable information, and those are interesting questions. Just because everybody can put content out on the internet
Yeah.
now, we're
Mhm.
not we're not all watching just a handful of network television stations, um, and so there's not so much of a gateway to truth, and that can be a good thing, and it can be a complicated thing too, because now anybody can, any truth is out there. You can put it out there, and people
Yeah.
can
Mhm.
can look and find each other. On the other hand, now that there's so many different narratives out there, how do you properly understand which ones are accurate?
Yeah, and that might actually be an opposing um what do you call it? A downside to self learning. You know, if we push away formal education and people have
Hmm.
to learn themselves, might not be so easy to find reliable sources of information nowadays.
That's right. And that's why I was saying this idea of credentialing may be important to put together
Yeah.
with self-learning. Anybody can learn anything on the internet, but you might learn the wrong things if you look at the wrong sources. I mean, there are contradictory educational pieces of content on the internet, right?
Mm.
There are videos that explain how the Earth is a sphere, and there are videos that explain how the Earth is flat. And so, um, yeah, how do you know what's correct? And so that's how larger institutions like educational institutions can provide a stamp of approval. Like if you do all these online courses, and at the end of the day, Princeton says, "Okay, here's your credential that says you satisfied, you went through this set of content, and you passed our criteria for having mastered the content, and here's a seal of approval from Princeton."
Mm.
Now, of course, some people are anti-institution, down with the government, that type of stuff. Okay, that's fine. But a seal of approval from Princeton is probably going to help you get a job that not having that seal wouldn't. So
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
value.
Also, you know, with the diverse opinions on different things and people having the ability to put out, well, their opinions online, it's probably pretty important that everybody has a voice in that way so people can decide for themselves what they believe. I'm you know, as I said, I wasn't alive when the internet wasn't a thing. So, but I could imagine, you know, a small town in the middle of nowhere being taught one thing that was maybe wrong so that the whole town would believe that that was right because they didn't have the access to form opinions for themselves. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And you're exactly right that the internet has made, maybe the democratization of truth is a way to
Yeah.
put it. Like anybody can go out there and present their case well. Um, Now, just because everybody can go out there and say things doesn't mean that everybody is saying true things.
No.
But the fact that we have so much more ability to put stuff out there means that everybody has a platform and has the ability. And then what you need to do to decide between all these different voices is to look at, use your critical reasoning and think about look at the evidence. And so you can evaluate all these different voices to see which ones are correct or useful or whatever. So just because more people are speaking, that doesn't mean more truth is out there, but it does mean that the minority voices can be heard in a way that wasn't true before, and that is an unqualified good thing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all for free speech. Everybody has a say in everything.
Now, how old were you, or what grade in school were you when the iPhone came out, or when
Oh,
you first started, like,
hmm.
mobile phones started being used?
I think I don't know about the first iPhone, but I specifically remember my classmates started getting the iPhone 3 when I was probably in 4th grade.
Okay, okay, so
I
yeah, you were pretty young then.
Yeah, I'm 24, yeah.
I'm 52, so turning 52 next. Yeah, 51 now, turning 52.
That's awesome. How was it like witnessing this whole thing come into reality? The internet, everybody being able to connect with each other a lot easier.
Yeah, it has been really interesting, but it sort of happens slowly, so it's easy to miss it. Even now, I think to myself, when I was in college and hanging out with friends, and we would go meet someplace, how did we do that without cell phones,
Yeah.
without mobile phones? And I don't remember. I guess we just had to like plan ahead and be sure to be on time. Um, there's this author named Kevin Kelly. He wrote a book called What Technology Wants, but he's famous for writing a 10-year birthday thing about the arrival of the internet. Let's see, 2005. I think he wrote it in 2005 about the previous 10 years from 95 to 2005. And he said the accretion of tiny marvels has blinded us to the arrival of the stupendous.
Huh.
So in other words, as these tiny little, like, oh, now we can look up phone numbers online, and now we can use Google Maps to find our direction. Now we can text each other. All these tiny marvels, he called them. Every once in a while there's something new, and there's always new things on the internet. But then if you stop and look back in the past 10 years, and that's still true today, like, it's the arrival of the stupendous, right? Look at all these stupendous things we can do.
Yeah.
Even YouTube, 2000. So even when he wrote that, YouTube didn't exist. I think YouTube started in 2005 or
Yeah, I think you're
6.
right.
I posted
5-ish.
my first video in 2000, July of 2006, I believe, just because I did this tour of a dorm that was being built, and I thought, oh, my students would like to see this. Where can I put it? Oh, there's this new thing called
Yeah.
YouTube, and they'll let you put it for free instead of having to pay. Um, so yeah, I really do think it is the accretion of tiny marvels blinding us to the arrival of the stupendous,
That's a
even still.
really interesting quote. This may be a bit unrelated, but I just thought of this. Do you think you guys had more trust amongst each other before the internet? Like you said, you guys had to plan ahead. You couldn't text each other where to meet, when to meet.
Let's see, trust. Um, I guess it just felt like that's, again, like I'm saying, it's hard to remember what it was like because things are so different now.
Yeah.
I guess we just sort of had a different way of doing things, and we had to uh yeah, we had to trust each other to show up. Like if 5 of us friends were meeting at a restaurant at 7 p.m. um and then plan you couldn't really change plans. If you were going to change plans, then you just didn't show up. And then
Yeah.
maybe the next day they said, oh, what happened? Oh, my car broke down, or oh, I couldn't come,
Ah,
or
yeah.
whatever. So if yeah, it just you just didn't you just had to live differently, I guess. Of course, that's true for any technology, right? I mean, the fact that we had landlines to call each other
Mm.
was still a big deal and a big difference. Then I was looking through some old letters from my ancestors. My parents have some letters, and we were doing some scanning projects. But But back then they had to write to each other. So you couldn't call and make plans. You had to write and make plans to meet several days in advance. Like, oh, I'll be there Wednesday afternoon in 4 days. Okay, well, if you couldn't change plans,
Yeah.
you're going to be there or you're not. So, and even that, letters are delivered in a day or two. But at the time of the American Revolution, which we celebrated yesterday here in the United States, it took 3 weeks to get letters from England to America. And so, if you're going to write and ask the King of England a question about governance in Boston, you wrote a letter, waited 3 weeks, and then he answered it, waited 3 more weeks, and you got your answer 6 weeks later. So, yeah, having faster technologies to communicate is generally a good thing, but it also lets us be more uh, not as more non-committal. Like, oh well, maybe I'll see you tonight. That's 4 hours from now, and maybe
Yeah.
something else will come up. And okay, fine, I'll be there at the restaurant. Oh, how about we meet here instead?
Yeah.
Last minute.
Plans change quickly. Yeah. It sounds so dumb for me because I'm so young, and it's so silly, but I would love to have lived even back in the 70s or 80s, which is such a relatively short time ago, compared to the grand scheme of things. But looking back at some pictures from the 70s or 80s when my parents were young, just looked like people were just living in the moment a lot more than we are today.
Yes, and that's you'll experience this more and more as you get older. That's the way that nostalgia works. Our minds, thankfully, are designed such that we remember the good things, the happy times, and the harder things we sort of forget. And so, 20 years from now, it may be that you'll look back in the year 2042 and think, "Oh man, back in 2022 when I was 24, those were the good old days because of this," and you'll remember the fun and good things and not remember the harder things. Um, so surely, yeah, there are advantages to having a simpler lifestyle back in the 70s and 80s, but there were disadvantages too. But like I said, if your car broke down today, you can text somebody and say, "Hey, could you come pick me up? I want to go to the movies with you guys." But and I know I said we will be there at 7, but I can't. Can or you call Uber or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there are advantages and disadvantages to living in any time, I suppose.
Absolutely. So fascinating. Matthew, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking your time to do this.
Thank you for having me on. This is fun. Appreciate you having me here.
Tell people where they can find you on social media.
Yes, they just search for my name, Matthew Weathers, on YouTube, and you can find my YouTube videos. Twitter is another place that if you want to DM me, I'm happy to answer. Just twitter.com/Matthew Weathers. That's MattheWeathers. And I'm at both places there.
Awesome. Again, appreciate so much.
Thank you.
And to the listeners, as always, appreciate you guys tuning in, watching, viewing, subscribing, everything. Thank you. Peace.